So welcome everyone. I want to thank Carrie Waller for agreeing to do this demo for us. And I hope some of you, if you haven't done so already, will sign up for her workshop. It is running October 16th through the 18th in person at the Hoover Theater. It should be a lot of fun. You'll see her stuff today. And then I just want to remind people to look at the website, SCVWS.org. and look at next year's workshops also. We have, I think, 6 lined up, and we'll be throwing in a couple of extra, maybe demos or something. And the one I want you to pay particular attention to is February, which is it's a member appreciation event. It's 2 days. It's a Saturday and Sunday. The cost is only $20 for a workshop with David Lobenberg. And yes, it's Super Bowl weekend, but don't let that scare you, because the workshop runs from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. and football doesn't start till 3:30. So that gives you plenty of time to get to a party or get your goodies in order. And then we have, let's see, in January, well, this is our last workshop. Carrie Waller is our last workshop for this year. And we'll start off in January with, what's my writing? Lynn Ferris. She'll be here from January 22nd to the 24th. Then David in February. In March, we have Lorraine Watry. That's an in-person event. And David Lobenberg is on Zoom. Then we have in April, in person, Nancy Grigsby. And then we have a few months in between that will fill in with other things. But September, we have an online workshop with Lori Goldstein Warren. And then October, Alexis Levine, which is also on Zoom. And hopefully you guys will sign up early so we don't end up having to cancel anything. I do want to thank you all for coming today. And I'm going to turn this over to Debbie, who is going to tell you about Carrie and give you her bio. So I'm going to spotlight both of them.
Thanks, Vic. Okay. Carrie Waller is an internationally recognized artist working in realistic, detailed style. Her studies in the interior design and graphic design, as well as her time spent living in Europe and Asia, have influenced her as an artist. Carrie currently works from her Arkansas studio after returning from Tokyo, Japan, where she resided in for the last 8 years. Her unique works are bold, vibrant, and dramatic. Carrie has won numerous awards and has been published in many publications, including the Watercolor Artist magazine, The Art of Watercolor and Splash, and the Best of Watercolor series 14, 16 through 23. Her works have been exhibited all over the world, most recently in Tokyo Metropolitan Museum of Art, the
Kyocera
Museum, the Hiroshima Professional Museum. Carrie has won 10,000 grand prize in the American Women Artists of 2020 Museum Competition. She is a signature member of the American Watercolor Society, National Watercolor Society, Louisiana Watercolor Society, Mid-Southern Western Color Watercolorists, and Watercolor Home Society. What did I leave out?
I think you got
it. Okay, good.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much to Vicki and Debbie for putting this together and doing an introduction. I'm happy to be here with everyone this afternoon. I'm going to be demoing for you. I think you can split. There we go. We're going to demo today this painting. I have my reference photo here, and I'm going to go through before I start painting. I've already started, as you can see, this one, and I have little areas all over so I can show different techniques throughout this paper of, throughout my paper of what I do differently in places. Since I paint kind of slowly, a painting like this would, take me at least a week probably. So if, so I'm going to show you little pieces here and there. Feel free, I do really well if people want to ask questions, please keep it related to the art. But if you want to ask questions, you know, you missed a color, or you know, you want me to clarify something, I don't mind at all. If the moderator doesn't mind, I should have asked Vicki. Sorry, Vicki, didn't ask.
Oh, not a problem. I'm
Okay.
glad you mentioned.
Otherwise, try to keep yourself muted so that if the dogs start barking and all that stuff, that we don't get to hear all of it. But I'm going to show you a little bit about my process. So if you'll make this one the primary one, I'm going to flip my other video off because sometimes it downgrades the resolution to have both my devices on. We're gonna we'll come back to that in a second because I'm going to show you a time lapse of where I got here. But I want to show you a little bit of my supplies and how I start, so that you know, and especially if you're taking the workshop, you'll have an idea, so that you understand what I'm doing and what I use. So I paint with pan watercolors, and I've made them myself. Well, not the paints. The paints are Daniel Smith predominantly. I have a couple of Holbeins thrown in there, but mostly Daniel Smith watercolors. And what I've done is made my own pans in these little containers. And this came out of an evolution, right? We're always like trying to streamline our process and make it a little easier. So I had palette upon palette, and I was starting to hoard palettes because I had a hard time wiping out palettes, because what if I needed that color? And it was such a great. So I was down this rabbit hole. So I wanted to streamline that process. And also I was moving internationally. So I wanted to be able to take all my paints with me on the airplane. And so therein lies another issue, right? Because you can only have so much in liquids on the airplane. So that's how I derived these little palettes. Originally, I had little bead containers, and I had all my colors in these little bead containers. You can find these at any hobby store, Walmart, even Amazon. And that's how I had my colors originally, and they're labeled on the bottom. But I ended up having all these little cups scattered all over, and it just was getting kind of chaotic. So these little containers, which are kind of like daily pill containers, right? These I actually got at a hardware store in Japan. But these little containers enabled me to put an entire family of colors together. And I like that hole in the middle. You can stick it on your thumb, and you've got all these colors, and you flip open whichever one you want. I will say, if you are trying to do any of this, let's say you're traveling internationally or something like that, and you want to take them on the airplane, they take a couple weeks to dry out completely. So you want to factor that in if you decide to, you know, make your own little palette like this for any reason. They're labeled on the bottom with a waterproof label and then a Sharpie, so that, of course, we're dealing with water all the time. So you're going to get messiness on the bottom, and you want your colors to stay there so you know what they are. So, and then the other thing, if you purchase these containers, make sure they hinge at the back. If they hinge at the front, then you have, you know, when you're putting your thumb in or whatever, it's not as convenient. And the other thing that was neat about that, I have it over here. I'll show you guys. So I found these little bungee cords, and I'm able to put them all on my little bungee cord and keep them all together. And they're numbered at the top. And I also I don't have them here right now, but I have my little charts so that I can see, you know, which colors are in each container. So I have little swatches that are correlated to the number on the container. And then this is nice for travel, even if you're teaching workshops, going to a workshop. It keeps everything together, organized. I can have them in order, and I know, you know, where they are. So I have a couple of these little bungee cords for all the paints that I have. So I just wanted to show you my system. So Danielle asked, what do I do about mixing with the palette? Because of that, I adapted to mixing my colors on my paper. And what happened when I started doing that is I started to get really vibrant, clean washes on my paper. So I do use these little lids to get various degrees. Let's say I kind of talk about when I do washes, I'll say I paint from, like, if you think about dairy, you paint from a skim milk consistency to like a butter consistency, right? So I can add water and these little lids back here to change the consistency. If I want a skim milk wash versus a more saturated, you know, like cream consistency, I can do that in here. But I'm not mixing colors together. I'm doing that on my paper. So that is a little rundown of my supplies as far as paint. And then I have my brushes. For the most part, I'm using a size 4 brush, a synthetic. An 8 is pretty big for me. And then I have some flat brushes. Sometimes I'm going to show you today a technique to get some values in here now that I have things painted darker with a flat brush. I always have scrubber brushes. One is an old synthetic brush that's worn out. I use this guy in just about every painting to kind of pull out, and you know, you can make things a little blurry with this. You can pull colors out, scrubber brush. And then I have a stiffer one. These are called an eraser. I think Rosemary Company calls them eradicators. This is a Korean company, EOEO, and this is the eraser. So these come in various sizes as well. There's a little bigger one. So those I'll use if I need to pull out, you know, anywhere that I got pigment that I didn't want it. And also sometimes I use a cosmetic brush in the background if I'm trying to blend. And these are just, you know, actually the cosmetic brushes are nice. This is an e.l.f. one because the hairs don't normally fall out and you can get them economically at the store. So I'm always looking at the hardware store and at the, you know, Walmart or wherever in the makeup section to see what they have that I can use in my works. Because a lot of times it's the same kind of thing. It's just cheaper there. I also, when I'm using masking fluid, which I mask a lot, and I know masking is a love or hate situation. On this painting, I have used Liquitex's masking fluid. I like this because it's pretty affordable and it's thin. And I want a thinner masking fluid because I use a ruling pen, so it needs to flow. This is a ruling pen for anyone that hasn't seen them before. They're not all created equally. This is a Japanese ruling pen. What I like about this one is it actually opens, so you can clean it, get the masking fluid out of there, or I use this with paint as well, and so that is easy to clean. So it's kind of a little, it almost looks like tweezers. It has a little reservoir there that you can put masking fluid or paint in. There's a little wheel that allows you to open or close it for thinner lines or thicker lines. So I'll be demonstrating today masking some of the lettering on these bottles so that you can see how I do that with the ruling pen. There is a learning curve to a ruling pen if you haven't used one. So it's like everything, the more you use it, the better you get at it. But like I said, they're not all created equal. The ones you find on Amazon, they're like $8 are not that great. This one is, the company is called Uchida, U-C-H-I-D-A. You could find it on Amazon for a while there. You are paying about as much for shipping as you are the tool, so it comes out to around $50. But I'll tell you, it's worth it. There's also, I think it's John Neal Books, and they have a line of ruling pens that are made in England that are nice as well. And so you can check that out if you're looking for a higher quality. Some of you may have these in an old drafting set and don't even realize it. And if you do have a drafting set somewhere, a lot of them are like German made, and those have nice ruling pens in them too. So you may have one in your house and not even know what it was or not have used it. So I have started this painting today, like I said, because it takes me a week or more. My big paintings, sometimes a month or more, depending on how much painting time I get. So I started this so that I could demonstrate a few different areas for you on this one. Before we do that, I'm going to have Vicki put me back on my other screen. If we can make my Carrie Waller this screen the predominant one. All right, I'm going to screen share and I'm going to show you first a time lapse of how I got to where I am right now. And then I'm also going to show you the painting that we're going to be doing in the painting that we're going to be doing in the workshop. Let me see if it'll let me do this one. Okay. Let me know what you're seeing. Are you seeing the last one? Let me stop that one. Okay. Are you seeing this time lapse?
Yes, we're seeing the time lapse.
So here is the beginning stages. I'm doing this kind of crazy, it looks almost like tie-dye background back here. So I'm doing a lot of wet on wet in this area and lots of colors. Like you said, I'm blending those colors on the paper and letting those wet on wets do their thing back there. And now I went in with a little blender tool and was scrubbing out some of that. So that's the background. Now we're going to move to the next video. All right, here's a continuation. Here's my cat Winston. I have a kitten and he's all over the place now. So we're working on this bottle now. And Winston's helping. And so we have our blues and greens. I'm going to go over the colors that I'm using. And so now I have my size 4. I'm doing more controlled. So there's a wet on wet, and even down in these areas, because I mask so much, they're kind of controlled wet on wets that I'm doing in these bottles. Here's continuation. I'm using Horizon Blue, Verditer Blue, that's a hard one to say. Wisteria, Sap Green, Bismuth Vanadate Green, Yellow. So I'm using all these colors wet on wet into each other in these areas with my smaller brush. And then the last one right here will take us up to speed where we are now. And I'm just working on the first washes because I'm going to add masking on top of this paint over here. So I wanted to get these first washes in so I could show you. So that's Spring Green and Horizon Blue and Ultramarine Turquoise that I'm kind of mixing in this area. Then I'm working on the details of this bottom again. There's Winston, Stella. And Indian Throne Blue for the darks down there. And then this is the painting we're going to be doing in the workshop. It's called Ikigai, and it means reason for being. And so this painting is from my time in Japan. And so we've got our ginkgo leaves, which I found just as beautiful as the sakura, the cherry blossoms. And I just loved how the light poured through them. So to me, this is kind of like everything I love, a reason for being, that bright light. The muse is one of my big, light is a muse of mine. So having that dramatic light with these big dramatic shadows and this cup of tea on a crisp fall day. So anyway, this is what we're going to be working on in the class. And it's a lot of fun because there's a lot of patterns and life going on. We also have this still life in here, and then these big dramatic shadows. It's kind of fun because even in realism, it's putting shapes and colors together, and it's really at little mini abstracts that come together to form this realistic painting. And that's what I kind of get lost in, and that's what I love about painting glass and realism. And so that's what we're going to do in the class together. And when we do the class, like just like today, it's kind of step by step, and I paint and then you paint, and then at the end we ask questions and we just have a good time and come out hopefully with everyone is pretty successful at the end with these paintings. I don't know if we will finish the whole painting, but we'll get darn close to it. And then a lot of times if I don't finish, I try to video the rest of it and send it out to students at the end if we don't get all the way finished, just so that you have resolution and you can finish. So that's what we're painting. So I'm going to stop the screen share now, and we'll go back to just my desk view. And I guess if anyone has questions, feel free to ask them. I'm going to start demoing, but you're welcome to just pop on. I can paint and talk. No problem. All right, so the colors that I'm using a lot of colors. I would not call myself a limited palette painter. I pretty much, when I do workshops, I try to stream it as much as I can, as minimal as I can, because I know it's expensive to buy all the paints. But I pretty much have my little lid open for the colors that we're going to be using. And this is one that I don't use all the time, Verditer Blue. I always pick really hard paints to say, right? So I can trip myself up when I'm doing the workshops and paintings. But the Verditer Blue I've been using a lot in this bottle over here, and it's going to come in handy in this area here. So I'm going to go ahead. That's what I didn't find was my rubber cement pickup. Always have a rubber cement pickup. I was looking for a minute ago and I never did. I'm still kind of, we just moved here in July, so I'm still kind of getting myself together as far as in my studio. Improvise. I like to take masking off with a rubber cement pickup. That's a pet peeve of mine when people are using their fingers, but I can't find mine right off the top, so we have to do that today. So anyway, I have this bottle close to resolution. This one over here. We have the lettering here, which is kanji. This is a prescription bottle, a Japanese prescription bottle. And so we have this kanji coming down the middle. So I have basically masked out the bright white areas of the lettering. And lettering can be tricky, especially like a pressed glass lettering. So we're going to do some of that in here today. And I will show you, I've already got like the washes down and the masked area. So I will show you taking off the masking and finishing some of these letters. So we're going to try to do both areas of that. I've had this kind of crazy background up here, but I do want to get my colors a little darker in a couple places. And I normally, when I'm painting, I kind of paint from one side across. For the demo purposes, we're going to jump around a little bit, but I kind of adopted this practice so that I make sure that I get my values right from the beginning. But I'm going to show you, we're going to deepen some values up here. So I'm just using clear water right now to engage this, get it all wet again. And this is what I kind of call a unifying wash, where you're kind of getting some of these lines to blur a little bit. If you get too much blurring, you can come back in with the thirsty brush. A thirsty brush is just a brush that has most of the water out, all the pigment out, and you can kind of suck up the paint. It's like an eraser. So I can go back and suck paint up with a thirsty brush. So when you have colors that are a little more opaque, this yellow that I used in here is a more opaque yellow. It's called bismuth vanadate yellow. I like it because it takes charge and I can put it on top of colors and it does like a halo effect out. But when you're doing a wash like that, a unifying wash over it, it's going to spread a little bit. So you have to be aware and maybe move your brush around a little bit. So I want to get a little darker in some of these areas. So I'm going to use my Payne's Blue Gray. I use Payne's Blue Gray a lot. I'd say every painting. I'm going to drop some of this in here. I got this wet everywhere because I don't want hard lines, right? I want those soft lines that we get with a wet on wet. And I needed to darken this a little bit. As it dried, we know that watercolor dries lighter, 15 to 20% lighter. So as it dried, it got a little too light on me. And I want to go back and get some of this darkness in here. So that's why we did that wash, just to get everything a little wet again. And now I'm just kind of taking my brush, I'm dropping in some with the tip of my brush. And then if I need to maneuver it and get it to blend, I can use the side of my brush. This is still my size 4. I've used pretty much a synthetic brush now most times because it holds a little less water. And I don't want soup. I want controlled wet on wet. And so I kind of like the synthetics for that. If you're used to painting with natural brushes, that's no problem. It's also what you get used to. I'm going to come in with a thirsty brush now, and I'm just going to clean up. I had what I call like little furry edges there. So I'm just cleaning up. I have a thirsty brush, clean, not a lot of water. I'm just going to clean up those furry edges. Put that paint back in place where I want it. And now we've darkened that up. When I take all my still life pictures outside generally, and always in the bright sun. So I'm very reliant on a lot of sun. This is still the Payne's Blue Gray. I'm dropping some over here. And so I've set these bottles up outside, and then I come back in and I manipulate them in Photoshop. I saturate them even with my iPhone camera and in different places, and then also in Photoshop. And so when you see these back here, this blurry background, it's actually my neighbor's house back here. But I don't want her bushes and all that stuff. So it's blurred back here, and we just have the colors. And the colors have been saturated, and they do these fun things. I'm gonna drop in a little, I'm gonna get my Carbazole Violet. And I'm gonna drop a little of the Carbazole Violet right in here. So I'm just kind of looking at my photo reference. And I didn't mention I paint from an iPad. You can see it's over here on my iPad. And I like painting from the iPad because you have it's backlit. So that you get bright colors. So I feel like it's made my paintings better. And number two, you can zoom in and get more details. I can pull this over and kind of show you. But you're able to zoom in to get details, especially when you're doing like the bottles with those lettering. You can zoom out, you can change your light, whether your screen is brighter or darker on there. So I love painting from the iPad. I have a little printed out version here so you can see what we're painting, but the iPad is what I'm looking at when I'm painting. But I photograph all these, like I said, outside in the sun. And those of you that are in my workshop, we will actually go outside, weather dependent. We'll do it inside otherwise, and we'll set up a still life. And I'll show you how I set it up, how I do some fun tips so that we can manipulate it a little bit to get effects we want. And everyone that I've done this with classes, they love that part. So we'll continue to do that in the workshop this time. Hopefully our weather cooperates. We're in California, it should be good, right?
So Carrie, one question someone's asking is what type of paper are you using?
Okay, this is Arches 156-pound cold press paper.
Okay, thank you. And then Sharon's asking what kind of stand do you put the iPad on?
Okay, this stand is really cool. I got it off Amazon. So this is you can see the bottom of it. It clips on right here on the sides and you're able to put your charger at the bottom and it's a stand like that. I really love it because it gets it up off of the table and you can find it on Amazon. If you have trouble finding it, send me an email and I can send a link, but it's pretty, if you do a search for iPad stand. And it needs to be one that fits your iPad. So make sure whatever size iPad you have, because this one, it actually expands for multiple sizes, but you would want to make sure if you have like an iPad mini, it might be too big for that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Same thing, my phone above me is on my telescoping stand too, so for video today. All right, so that is getting our darks back there. See how we got that dark and everything kind of just moved around a little bit and blurred even more, which is great. All right, so the other thing I wanted to show you before I get into this bottle here, I'm gonna show you that whenever you have a wash down like this and it's completely dry, and I can always tell you how to gauge how dry everything is. I do a temperature check and I use the back of my finger. If I come over here to this piece and I touch the back of my finger and there's nothing, no paint, and there's nothing that's happened here, I can feel the temperature. It doesn't feel cool. It feels, dry. So I come over here now to make sure that this feels the same as this. As long as you're getting the same temperature to same feel, you're good. If this is cool to the touch, it's not quite dry and you don't want to put masking on top of it. Yes, you can use a hair dryer. I don't typically do that. I prefer to just wait until it's dry, but we spend a lot of time watching paint dry, right? So sometimes it's necessary, especially like in workshops and demos. So anyway, I have done a wash over here. This is this green bottle back here. There's two, these greens are popping through. So I've done these washes. It's a spring green. It's phthalo yellow green and spring green, and they're both Daniel Smith colors. And so the phthalo yellow green is this brighter one. The spring green is this a little more muted, cooler green right in here. And then there's some ultramarine turquoise down here and some verditer blue right in here. So I've kind of got my transparent, what I call my skim, skim wash, the skim milk consistency that. And now we're going to go in and we're going to mask on top of that some of these highlights that are in here. So I'm getting my Liquitex masking. There's other brands that I've used. I love Holbein's masking, but I have a harder time finding it now that I'm back in the States. You guys are in California. You might have it at your stores because you're closer to the, I don't know how much things are imported in, but anyway, the Holbein masking, I can find it online, but it was more expensive. So this Liquitex has worked pretty well. The Holbein was nice too, because they had it in a blue and it never, like the PBO, sometimes I've had trouble with it leaving a blue stain on my paper, and the Holbein never did that. And for workshop purposes and demo, it's nice to have a color just so you guys can see easier where I'm masking. But you can see on here where I'm masking. So I've got my ruling pen and I'm coming in and masking. I didn't want these to be bright white highlights, not the white of the paper, but I wanted this bright green. Now we're doing lots of little dots. That's kind of the key to these bottles. They have lots of little like dots and textures. So I can do that with my masking and save myself a lot of trouble if I were trying to scrub these out, and it gives a really nice effect. So the more I mask, the longer I paint, the more I mask, the better I get at it, the thinner I get at it. And don't have to do a lot of correcting at the end. So if you really have a hate relationship with masking, it's just you haven't used it enough. It's a tool I rely on a lot now, and I just think it's fabulous that we have it at our disposal. But I completely understand the frustration, and if you are frustrated, it's probably you're putting it on too thick of a line, too lumpy of masking, and a lot of times it's just the masking fluid itself is too thick. So you want to find one that's not as thick. One masking I really don't like is Winsor Newton. It always left like an oily residue for me. So I just don't like that one. But we all have our individual likes and dislikes when it comes to our supplies. So you got to use what you're comfortable with. The other one I will discourage my students, there's that one that's bright orange. I think it throws your colors off, like fluorescent orange. So I would have a hard time because it's just so garish, you know, you want to get off the paper. So at least these that don't have color, they're not intrusive. I'm just doing some little dots over here. So I just wanted to show you how you can mask on top of the colors. And we could continue to do this. Let's say we had varying shades. We could do another wash, let it dry, mask. I've done that on a lot of paintings, and you can get all these little dots and textures and all of that done with your ruling pen and masking fluid. If you don't have a ruling pen, I mean, my friend uses a stick outside that she shaves down. Another lady I know from Louisiana, she takes a plastic spoon and cuts it in a certain way. So people have all kinds of ways. I've done lots of things. I used a stylus for a long time. I just have never liked the brush. Using a brush, I have never, but if I practice enough, I'm sure I can get that down too. I just prefer this method. Sorry, I know that's kind of like nails on a chalkboard. My kids don't understand that phrase because they've never on a chalkboard in the classroom. And then same thing over here, these little bottles, they have so much texture and things. Even if I don't see little dots of colors, I'll come in and add some in these washes before I start to thicken, do another layer of another wash on top. I just want to get some of these really pretty sparkles. The more sparkles, the better. When it comes to light and glass. So I'm going to add extra dots here and there. Of course, I'm looking at my reference photo to make sure it's kind of in the right location and whatever, but I do want to have lots of sparkle. Especially when you have colors like down here, they start to translate. There's a dark, you're seeing the back side of the bottom of this bottle coming through this one. And so you start to have a layer of darkness back here from when the bottom of the bottle is. And so there's this transition. So I want to do a lot of dots right in here so that we have an easier transition. It's not as hard. These bottles, when I photographed them this time, I filled them with water. That's another thing. Put water in them, put different colors in them. There's lots of things you can do with your props. So these happen to, I put water in them this time because it magnifies things a little bit. All right. I'm not going to bore you. I'll show you some masking on lettering in a little bit, but I won't bore you right now since we just did a lot of masking. We'll get back to painting. And we'll come over here. And we'll start to work on this bottle. I'm gonna wipe my ruling pen. I could just let this dry, but I'm just gonna wipe out the masking fluid. All right. I do have another one of these masking. I do gold leaf and watercolor sometimes, so I have another one specifically just for gold leaf sizing. And I have it marked because the sizing gets really sticky and everything, so I have a designated tool just for that. Okay, we're gonna come to this bottle and we're gonna do our first washes, and I'm gonna use my Holbein Horizon Blue. Holbein's Horizon Blue is this really pretty icy blue. And if I can get Daniel Smith to make one, I won't have to switch my brands up. But I love this color. So we're gonna come in with a skim milk consistency. See how I'm just adding water to my lid to get that. And I'm gonna come in down here and I'm gonna see where it starts the most, and it starts right in here. Reference photo over here so you can see. This reference photo is a little bluer than what's on my screen. So I'm coming down right under here and starting this light wash under here. So I'm really looking at the shapes. I don't have this masked right here on the side and it's pretty light, so I'm gonna go around that. And I do, when it comes to masking, I try to pick and choose my battles, right? Like where is it gonna be beneficial and where is it gonna be harder to clean up a mess? And just with time and paint to paper, you start to figure out when it's beneficial and when it's not as beneficial. I dropped quite a bit of pigment there, so I'm gonna get some water and thin this out. This is my size 8 brush because I'm doing a bigger wash. I'm trying to really look at my shapes and try to stick, even when I'm painting and with lots of layers, I always try to stick with the shape of the bottle when I'm painting so that it doesn't look flat. Like I wouldn't want to come in here with a big flat brush and just start going straight across. It's gonna make your bottle look flat. So I always try to go the contours of the bottle. And it does make a difference because I've had students in classes where they do a big flat brush straight across and it looks flatter. I don't know why, but it does. So always try to go with the the contours of what you're doing. If it's 3-dimensional, you want to have that round, feel the roundness. This is still my Horizon Blue.
Carrie, I have 2 questions for you. This is Debbie. One person would like to know, do you ever miss the colors you're going to use, their pigment colors that you know you're going to use in your painting?
I don't normally do that. Like I don't normally reconstitute them before I start. I just add water with my brush. I get, like I said, it's all about what you're used to. I get really annoyed if my paint, I've gotten used to painting in pans. I started that way. We were living in Europe when I got my first watercolors, and they were Schminke pans. That's all they sold at this art store, Schminke pans. So I learned to paint with pans to start with. And now it really aggravates me if my paint's wet because I've gotten used to it, like how much water. And that's part of the battle as an artist. We're trying to figure out the water ratio to everything. So it's just what I've gotten used to. If you've gotten it down and you want to reconstitute first, that's how you're doing it. But it's all in what you get used to.
And the second question is, do you ever use fluorescent watercolors?
I have 2 that I use that are fugitive. Opera Pink being one, I'm assuming that's what you're talking about, which has a fluorescent in it. Daniel Smith's Opera Pink, the longevity of it, I need to go look at the paper, but I think it's like 50 years. But the base of it is Quin Magenta. So after 50 years, when the fluorescent starts to fade, that makes it that bright pink color, you're still going to be left with Quin Magenta. So I feel okay with that. That after that fades out, it will still be a Quin Magenta, which is, more in this family right here. But I'm okay with that. And the only other one I use is Holbein Bright Violet. I haven't used it yet here, but that's this one. This is Holbein's Bright Violet. It's also a bright purpley color right there. That's the only 2 that I use. And like I said, they both will fade out to a pigment underneath it, it's not like you're going to be left with nothing. And I don't feel too bad about a 50-year lifespan. Most of our paints are tested to 100 years. I don't use alizarin crimson very often. That's another one. And that's fugitive, not necessarily fluorescent. I'm going to go around these letters a little bit because they have got a couple of the different colors bouncing around on these letters. So I've got, right now, this is Wisteria. And I'm painting with Daniel Smith's Wisteria. And John Cogley, that owns Daniel Smith, he didn't want to have any fugitive paints in the line at all, but artists really wanted opera pink. So he made sure it had the base was Aqua Magenta that is still going to be there. It's hard when you see these beautiful colors not want to use them. Okay, I'm going to try to go around the top of this. Is my Horizon Blue. And it's really helpful if any of you have never gotten you can go online to your, whatever your paint manufacturer is. Most of them, I know Daniel Smith has it, I think Holdline has it. They will have your color charts, they will have what they're made out of, you know, PV, you know, their color combinations that they're made out of, their pigments. And they will also, you know, tell you their light vastness, whether they're transparent or opaque. So if you're trying to figure out what you want to use for a painting, let's say you're painting for a show that only takes transparent watercolors, then you want to go online and really do your homework and make sure you're picking those colors. And like Daniel Smith has a dot card and it has all that information on it. And they have their dot card is a little dot of every one of their colors. And then it also has all the information you need as far as whether it's fugitive or it's light fastness, all of that. And they've got a lot of good stuff on the Daniel Smith website. They just did a live the other day and they were showing where they have the C-Lab color charts and you can go in and look up you know, a lot of different combinations and colors. So there's, if you look on their resources tab on the Daniel Smith website, they have a lot of nice tools.
Carrie,
Mm-hmm.
do you, when you're selecting your colors, do you pay attention to whether they're single pigment versus mixed pigments? Do you find any difference in the vibrancy or in those choices?
I don't. In fact, I would say most of the colors I use are mixes, and not all of them, but a lot of them. So I really, when I go and I'm picking my colors, first of all, I've painted enough now that I have kind of my best friends, right? My colors that show up in just about every painting. And so I always have my best friends that show up. And I am more particular. I don't like granulating colors that much because when I'm painting glass, I just don't, unless it's got a lot of texture, I'm wanting smoother washes, right? So I'm looking more for non-pigmenting colors. So that's my kind of what I'm looking at. So I will go through my color swatches that I have for all the paints that I have, and I will go through and shop. You know, I'll have my, I guess I should back up and say, you know, I told you I photograph all my still life outside in the sun, then I take them in, I photo edit them in my phone because I use my phone to take my pictures. I'll photo edit them in my phone and I will photo edit them in Photoshop. So I want to have, the way I operate, I'm a very planned individual. So I want to have this, when I'm done manipulating and everything in my photo reference, I want it to be about 90% where I want that painting to be when I'm done, so that I've taken out guesswork and I've really worked out all my color combinations, all my composition issues ahead of time. So then I'm able to take that photo reference and shop my colors. So like I said, you've painted enough, you've got colors that you know you're going to use, right? Because you painted enough with them that you're like, I know this will probably be in here. A color that I can, horizon blue is in just about every one of my paintings. Quinacridone gold is in a lot of my paintings that have warm colors. So there are just your performers and your ones that you're very familiar with, and they play well with other colors. And then after that, I will go to my color swatches. Let's say this blue in here was kind of a different, it wasn't quite a phthalo blue red shade. It wasn't quite an ultramarine. So I'm using this Verditor blue, which is not one that I use a lot, but it's the right color, and it plays well with horizon blue. So I'm using this color in this one. So that's the next thing I do is I will try, I have a lot of paint, and I am an ambassador for Daniel Smith. So I like to play around with new colors and introduce myself to new ones, because sometimes you get some combinations of colors that you're just blown away with. And I can tell you that happened. I was painting one, and Quin magenta and rich green gold, those two colors together, I used that in a painting, and it was like magic happened. So I do like to introduce myself to new colors that I don't use all the time, to see if I find a combination, or all of a sudden I have a new best friend that I'm going to paint with, you know, a lot. So that comes into consideration too. But I get my little swatch cards out, and I literally will shop, look at my reference photo, look at the swatch card, try to find the paint, you know, the paint that looks the best with it. So that's the next step in the process. And then I put together a supply list. A lot of times it's workshops, even if it's not for a workshop. If I'm painting on my own, I want to make sure I know what colors were in it. Because sometimes you're going to teach or do a demo later on, and it might be one that you want to do, or you might be in a magazine or something, and they want a supply list. So you just never know. So I try to keep track for each painting, what colors I use in that painting. So I haven't been doing it as much as I should. I was keeping a swatch card for every single painting that I did that told me what colors were exactly in there.
Hi, this is Jane. So in looking and doing your shopping from your pigment samples on your cards, do you concern yourself? Is there a need for the way you paint to look at whether it's the warm shade or the cool shade of a blue or a yellow or a red or whatever?
Yes and I mean, when I'm shopping those colors and I see, you know, it's a cooler blue or something, then I'm going to want to pick a cooler blue. I think kind of I'm not going back and then looking at the sheet and saying, you know, like saying, wait, is this cool or warm? I just making sure that it's getting me the effect that I'm wanting from the reference photo. But if I start to use a color and it's not working right, you know, that might be a question I ask myself, oh, should it be a cooler version? And sometimes what happens if you have a warmer color and you're needing it cooler, I might cool it off by combining it with another color as I'm mixing, because like, see how, even though I'm not mixing in a palette outside, the Verditor blue, the horizon blue, you know, they're kind of mixing together right now and playing as I'm doing this, going around these letters. And then I've got this wisteria. So I think it kind of happens naturally as I look at my reference photo.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And try not to second guess yourself too much. You know, some people spend a lot of time fretting over that kind of stuff. Sometimes you just need to start playing in the paint and see what's working and what's not working. And I get it. I mean, I just moved again. We moved back from Japan. And then we moved to Texas for 11 months. And then we just moved here after 11 months and had to do it all over again, right? And it's a little depressing because you've got everything set up at the last house, and then you move here and you got to set it all up again. We're going to be here for 2 years, maybe 3. So it took me a while to get myself back in. In fact, if I didn't have workshops and things happening like that right now, I probably wouldn't have put paint to paper yet, because, you know, I'm unpacking everything, still trying to get my feet my, sea legs, basically trying to get myself together, and kids in school and all that. So we go through those phases. So I think I get it. It's hard sometimes to get ourselves to paint, but I like to do the least amount of work to make myself paint. So I try to set things up and make my life easier so that I will get painting more. So that means wherever my painting space is, where does that work best for you? Don't fight it. What time of day do you paint the best in? Don't fight that. A lot of times I'm a night person. I'm a night owl, and I will try to fight myself and try to paint in the morning, and it just is not a good time for me to paint. So I think, well, what can I do during the morning? I can answer emails, I can do administrative stuff, I can ship art, things like that I can't do at night. So and I watch in classes, like you get frustrated, or you're just a little like, you don't want, it's hard to get into the creative process sometimes. Most of the time, I think that's one of the stages, getting yourself into it. And then other times you're just super inspired and you can't wait. Those are good times, right? I think that answer sprung out of, I see sometimes people fretting over and their palettes and their colors, and sometimes you just got to get in there and do it and see what works. And sometimes you just have to have like a practice piece off to the side. If mixing colors and figuring out colors is not a strong suit of yours, have a practice piece off to the side to see what works well. But like for me, having palettes was just becoming this overwhelmingly, it was overwhelming to have all those palettes around and all these different color combinations, and I just couldn't get rid of them all. And so I thought, how can I get rid of that? How can I get rid of that stress? I got rid of the palette. And I know I'm in the minority with that, and I'm not telling everybody to get rid of a palette. I'm just saying you got to figure out what works for you. Taking my thirsty brush and pulling this. I'm mixing in that verditer blue on top of this horizon blue up here, trying to get some of these lines. I'm going to use Endenthorn blue. This is another great blue. Need some darker shades in here. I'm going to use the tip of my brush. So everything's very wet right now. We have wet on wet happening. I don't want this to travel very much. So I'm getting kind of a little more saturated bit of this, loading my brush. And then the other thing you can do is, if you want to get rid of some water without getting rid of pigment, is you can take a piece of paper towel at the back of your ferrule and just soak some of the water up from the back. You leave your brush loaded then at the front, but you get rid of some of that water. And the reason I'm doing that is I want to put this on here, and I don't want it to travel too much. I got rid of a little too much water. I don't want it to travel too much. And now I'm just dabbing it with the tip, and kind of like pointillism. I'm just with the tip of my brush, trying to get this darkness in here. That's what having the water in the bottles gives it, that under the water, these magnified sea kind of colors. And then I've got these bottles of different colors behind it, which are shooting through these other colors. I'm going to get my ultramarine turquoise. I'm going to switch to my size 4 brush because it'll have even less water in it. I'm going to get my ultramarine turquoise. Ultramarine turquoise is also another color I don't use that much, but it worked good in this, works well with this, these colors. My ultramarine turquoise. Now that's a little cool, and I see a little warmer as I get in here. So I'm going to go find a warmer green now. I'm going to get a little bit of my phthalo yellow green. And I'm just going to put a little in there just to warm it up. Some paintings have a real cool side and a warm side. This one's got blue smack dab in the middle. These bottles are fun to paint because they just have all this ability to play in here. all these fun colors. And sometimes when I'm painting light bulbs or something like that, you're a little more rigid with your composition. And so it's fun to have all these like areas that just kind of are abstract almost. And one thing I try to do when I'm doing these paintings is I just want every little area to be beautiful. So if I were to crop out one little area of this painting, I want it to be interesting in that area, and I want it to have something beautiful to look at. So that's what I'm thinking about when I'm doing any of these areas. So I don't want a big area of just a solid color. That's boring. So I want life happening in every area. So even in this background, and this is kind of crazy back here, but you know, you have some of these darks and you have these shapes, but you want fun colors and things happening. So even if I had a solid area like these blues, this bottle in the middle, these blues are kind of, you know, they're a solid blue bottle, but we're going to make sure we have a lot of blues mingling and lots of pretty things happening. We're not just going to do a solid blue bottle. But my whole kind of, whether I'm painting light bulbs or I'm painting bottles and jars, it's kind of the same premise for me. It's these utilitarian objects that we see all the time, we use. You know, these bottles all had a function and purpose. They housed medicine or the elixirs and these, and so they had a purpose. But when you want to celebrate them because they're these little beautiful works of art on their own, and so I'm trying to figure out how I can make them as beautiful as I can in a still life. And so if that means I stack bottles like stained glass, you know, like different color bottles to get different effects, how can I make them the most beautiful? And that's what I want with my art, is I want it to be kind of magical and kind of like a, how did you get that? How did you photograph? You know, like I want people to ask like they don't understand, and it doesn't seem like it would happen in nature, because it doesn't. You know, you put all these bottles up and they're not in the sun and whatever, they, you know, they're just bottles. But you start to layer them like this with these colors and everything, and you see these beautiful works of art, almost stained glass. When I was a kid, my great grandmother's house was next door to my grandmother's house, and we would come and visit in the summers, and she had a canning pantry, and she had all those vegetables in jars, and they're stored, and there was a window in there. And I remember as a kid seeing the light come through, and I just thought it was kind of magical. So that is where some of my very first paintings with jars and bottles came from, that memory. And then the same thing with light bulbs. I was wanting to just, I read an article that they were going to start banning incandescent bulbs. And they have banned certain wattages. They didn't end up banning all of them, but to go to LED, and it just struck me. I was like, this is something that has been around since electricity, right? Like and so I wanted to really give it its moment. And as artists, you know, light is important to us. And I kept thinking, well, how is that going to change things with, you know, the LED lights? And so that's where that inspiration for that. This is Indian Throne Blue, and now I'm coming in and I'm getting another layer. I'm doing that kind of pointillism effect, and I'm getting another layer. We had that wet on wet, so it kind of diffused, right? And now we're coming in more of a dry on wet. It's almost dry. It's in the drier phase here, and so we're getting a little more of a darker saturation, a little more definition in our dot. Too much water in the brush. So I just kind of keep layering. And normally when I'm painting, not in a demo, I'm going to finish completely one area, move to the next area. Because I also, you know, in streamlining processes, wanted to eliminate that awkward stage in the painting where you have, I call it like the adolescent middle phase of a painting. And some people will, you know, paint everything in this first glaze and then come back and build and build and build. Well, it's easy to abandon a painting in the middle because you don't see how it's working or if it is working at all. So I wanted to eliminate that for myself. So I started painting things in completion from one side to the next, basically. And that helped me know that this painting was going to be successful from the beginning. But for me, it's just a challenge of streamlining processes to make it easier.
Carrie, I know this is a demo, but so it might not be what you normally do, but do you, because you're right-handed, would you normally start on the left and work to the right so you're not so you could see what, you know, rather than putting your hand over the finished parts?
No, I didn't know that I did this, that I painted the wrong, I shouldn't say wrong, different than you would anticipate for a right-handed person, right? I didn't know I did that until I had to do, I think I got a magazine asked me to do an article with a work in progress shots, right? So I wasn't in the habit of taking work in progress pictures. And I certainly at this time was not doing like time lapses of my painting. So I wasn't familiar, you know, I really hadn't seen myself paint. And so when I started taking these work in progress pictures, I realized, or maybe somebody pointed out, because I didn't, you know, they're like, you're painting backwards, you know, for a right-handed person. And so I don't know why I do that, except my arm does not drag across the graphite over here, which I would probably have to drape this whole thing so that I didn't, you know, like smear all the graphite. So I'm guessing that's why I started on this side.
Interesting.
But yeah, so if you don't take pictures or time lapse or whatever of your paintings, I suggest you do it because you learn about yourself and your process. There's two things when you're teaching and you have to verbalize what you're doing, you learn a lot about yourself, like, oh, and then the other thing is, you know, when you see it, you know, with work in progress pictures, you learn a lot about yourself and your process. So this is my phthalo yellow green. I had ultramarine turquoise, and I have, I think I did some horizon blue up there. So I'm getting that first initial kind of glaze, but you see, as I'm doing this glaze, I'm trying to get all these different colors in there. So I'm going back to my horizon blue now, and I'm trying to get these colors playing with each other and all right, I'm gonna get my vertitor blue coming down here. I just splashed. That is one thing when I'm doing a demo, I get a little messier, like I would be a little slower probably. Watching paint dry a little longer. Turquoise is my ultramarine turquoise down here. See that's such a pretty color. I'm gonna warm that up a little bit. So I'm gonna get a little phthalo yellow and just drop it in there. And that is kind of an answer someone asked, you know, about warm and cool. So hey, that was too cool. I realized that, so I dropped in some phthalo yellow right there to warm it up down there. So that kind of is how I'm adjusting as I'm going. And it was interesting. John Cogley just did, he does on, he's the owner of Daniel Smith, and he does lives on Thursdays and Fridays. And they're really neat. If you haven't been on there, he does these lives. And so he'll talk on Thursday about the pigments and go into depth about that. And sometimes, and then Friday they'll have a guest artist. So sometimes he'll do the artist palette on Thursday and they'll talk about it. Other times they just talk about pigments. So this last Thursday, they talked about the CLab color chart, and he was showing, you know, asking people, he was pulling all the different blues and yellows and different colors. And he was saying, okay, which one's the warm, which one's the cool? And people were having trouble determining, you know, which one they were. And so that CLab color chart, you know, that tells you the cools and the warms. And then, but it was interesting. the variety of answers. So if you haven't tuned into that, and maybe I think they're all on the, if you go to their Facebook page, you can watch the old ones, but it's interesting. And you learn about pigments that way too. So just through watching that, I might pick up a color that I want to try. Now, one thing I don't do very often is I don't normally like a lot of the mineral paints because they have like sparkle in them, the natural minerals sometimes have like a sparkle of the mica. And I'm careful about that because a lot of, if we're entering shows in societies, they don't want the iridescent qualities in those paints. So I'm careful about using those natural ones. But same token, if you're looking for a sparkle, you can use it in a natural pigment. Okay, I need a little highlight there that I'm not getting. I may have to wait till it dries, but I'm going to take my brush. And you have to be careful with these eradicator eraser brushes. They're very stiff. So if I do that, it's going to disturb the paper a little bit. So now if I try to I try to be really soft with it so it didn't disturb it too much. But if I were to disturb it too much, you want to make sure that's the last layer, because now you're going to have trouble. You're going to have like fuzzy edges on your paper and it's not going to do the effect you want. I'm going to come with my ultramarine turquoise. This is actually going to get darker than this. So when I'm painting, I normally have I start with my kind of mapping in of shapes. This is really kind of dark in here. It's the neck of this bottle back here, and it's pretty dark. And so I'm mapping with a lighter pigment. So that is the very first stage of my process, is I will map in a shape. Once we get kind of that initial wash, now I'm going to come in and map in a shape. So I'm really drawing with my paintbrush. I don't have these shapes drawn in with a pencil on here. Now I'm really relying on my reference photo, and I'm drawing in these neat shapes that are back here with my brush. So I'm mapping in that area with a lighter pigment. Now, why would I do that instead of just going with my dark? Well, if I mess up and I get it in the wrong spot, I want to be able to lift it, or I want to be able to change it. So if I had come in, straight up with a really dark staining pigment, I wouldn't be able to do that. So I try to come in with a lighter one, and then you have a little less work if you need to change it. Sometimes your brain can trick you. You think you're in an area, you think for sure you got that shape, and then you're like, hold up, that is not. You take a step back. It is important, very important, that you stop and take a step back when you're painting and look from across the room. If you're not looking from across the room, you can take a picture, because a picture will show you, it's like putting a different set of eyes on it. And the other thing is, I like to put it up at night when I go to bed, and then come in with fresh eyes in the morning. Now that I know I like that in the area, I'm dropping in and feeding that wash, and I'm dropping in more pigment because I know I have it where I want it. I'm going to feed that wash now. But this, to me, like all these shapes and colors, it's kind of like putting a puzzle together. And I get lost in the shapes and colors, and they're just beautiful. And so it becomes kind of a Zen process, where you're lost and dropping a little verditer blue in back here. You get kind of lost in this process of really like trying to decipher and put these puzzle pieces together, shapes, colors, and relationship next to each other. So that to me is what I love about painting, is getting lost in that. And then the hours just kind of fly by when you're painting like that. But my brain also like struggles and doesn't like to get to this stage. Once I get into a painting and I get to this stage, I love it and I'm in it. But up to this point, it's like the creative process fights me to just get to where it's kind of like trying to meditate. How long does it struggle to get your brain to stop thinking? I don't know if I've ever successfully been able to do that, except when I'm painting. I kind of go on autopilot. And I like to paint by listening to podcasts or putting on a show or movie that I've already seen. I don't have to watch it, but I can listen to it. Words are what I like to do, so my brain is actively engaged in listening to something else. Music, I don't, my brain doesn't actively engage. I've never been one that remembers all the lyrics or anything, so I don't listen to music. I listen to podcasts or movies or shows. All right, so now I'm
Carrie, Carrie, Jane's asking, does anyone know what or where the C Lab palette colors is about?
okay, if you go on Daniel Smith, it's CIELAB. If you go on Daniel Smith's website, and like I said, he just did a whole demonstration about it on Thursday of this last week. So you can find the Daniel Smith where he's talking in depth about it. But it's on their website, on the Daniel Smith website. You go under the resources tab and it has it on there. And it's like kind of an interactive place, and you learn about the colors and, you know, warm and cool and things that go together. So anyway, there's a lot of things on there. I was in the car listening and pickup line when they were talking about it. So I haven't even gotten to play with it, but I was really excited to share it with students because I thought it's one more tool, right, in our toolbox of things, if that's helpful. Some people, that's just like information overload, but if you're interested in that, I would check out that where he talked about it on Thursday of last week. Like go to the Daniel Smith Facebook page, and it was just this last Thursday, and he describes it and talks about it, and then you can find it on the website, and they also talk about where it is on the website and that live. But it was just a really fascinating to me, you know, like one more tool that we can have. And I thought it could be really beneficial to tell people about that, because if you're looking for more information, and it also breaks down, you know, like the pigments that each one is made out of and all that stuff. And you can find all that information, but it just seemed like it was more in one location, you know.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And if you've ever taken like color theory or classes in that, you know, there's different color charts, right? Like there's more than just one color chart or a color wheel, Munzel, and there's different versions. But anyway, it just seems like an all-in-one place to go look at that. All right, so that little bottle is coming together back here. I'm gonna add, I don't like that little shape. I'm gonna get a little green gold. I'm just trying to get this little shape integrated. So it doesn't look like a bottle, right? Like if just painting this, it's all these colors. I just love how these colors like swim together and mingle on the page. It's just addictive, you guys. And I do want to make sure I do some of these letters for you. A lot of people struggle with letters and glass. And they pop up a lot if you ever paint a Coke jar or a ball jar, or, you know, Coke bottle, ball jar, you know, anything like that. You're going to have this lettering that you have to, you know, it's pressed in the glass, and you have to paint it. So it's a good technique to learn. And once again, I mean, there's no trick to it. It's literally, you know, it's looking at relationship shapes and colors all next to each other. It's just funny how our brains can try to trick us into thinking it's more complicated than that. I get the same way. If you start talking about painting a portrait, my brain starts to panic, you know, like, and not one doesn't want to think about it that way. And it's the same as artists, we are training ourselves how to see and observe everything, right? All these relationships. Same thing I heard some of you talking about the plein air workshop you just had, the shapes of the flowers, the darks, you know, the values here, you know, of the colors and all that. And so it's just training ourselves to see no matter what we're painting, whether it's realism, whether it's even an abstract, you know, I would venture to, it's all color, shapes, relationships. And then of course there are some compositional, you know, if you're trying to plan out good compositions, there's some rules you can follow, for lack of a better word, that help you out. It's kind of like when deciding to do, and I needed to count this one, but normally, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah. So there's 7 bottles in this still life. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it's always more interesting to have odd numbers. So you wouldn't want to have even, 6. 7 is better, even if it's a little one back there, because our brains like to have odd. It kind of makes us look for that next pair, so we can't find that next pair, so we keep searching, so it keeps us bouncing around inside the composition. It's also good not to have your center be your main attraction, whatever you're looking at, be dead smack in the center. You want it off a little bit. So all those things are just things you can think about. There's the golden rule, of course, then you've got different color schemes you can look at too. So there's lots of things that can help with composition. And in my workshop, sometimes if we have time and everybody's interested, I have a little presentation on composition and design tips that are all out there. And if you look at any of your famous, whatever your favorite painting is, if you try to break it down and figure out what you love so much about it, you can start to figure out what design principles they utilize, what color schemes they utilized.
Carrie, we're coming up to about the halfway point. If you want to take a break at all, it's up to you.
Okay, we can do like a 5-minute break and we'll come back if anybody needs to take a second, get a drink. So we'll take a 5-minute break and then we'll come back. And if anybody wants a certain part of this painting demonstrated over another, otherwise I'm going to work on showing some of the lettering, how to do that. And I might take some of the masking off here to show how to resolve the kanji over here after you've masked out the white areas. So let's do 5 minutes. Maybe I can find my rubber cement pick up in that 5 minutes. I'll come back.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
All right, we'll see you all back here in 5 minutes at 2:55.
Hi, Carrie. It's Linda Nystrom.
Hi.
Hi. I took your terracotta class and I was fascinated by what you did. I have a question in terms of your lighting, given how elaborate you make it. What techniques in Photoshop do you have to learn how to do before you can change all these colors? Because mine are just so commonplace.
So a couple of things. I am not a Photoshop master by any stretch of the imagination. So a lot of editing I do with my iPhone. So I bump up the saturation a lot, and then sometimes it won't be enough for me. So I will take a screenshot of that image if I've maxed it out, and I'll bump it up some more. So I do a lot within just that. I would say probably your setup when you're photographing, it's probably not lit as well as it should be. So I have not found a way to replicate the dramatic sun. So trust me, I've tried all kinds of lights and I've tried all that stuff. And so if you're wanting that, I want dramatic sun. I know some people want a more subtle, like maybe a gray day look, but I'm wanting that dramatic sun. So I go outside on a sunny day, and there's different temperatures of the day, right? And there's different times of the year that have warmer light versus cooler light. So I happen to like the afternoon sun. It's a little more golden in the afternoon in most of the places I've lived. So I will do the afternoon sun. And this is one thing, like I said, in the workshop, we're going to do with this, weather permitting. If not, we'll try to emulate it indoors. But I'll show you how I manipulate just originally with that. Because if your photograph or whatever you're starting with, if it's not locked up and interesting to begin with, you're not going to get it to be interesting. So I start with that. So I'm going to make sure that my setup that I'm doing is interesting, and then I'm going to photograph. And half the time when I'm doing those photographs outside, I can't really tell because it's so bright what I'm getting. So I take a lot of pictures, and then I come in the house, and it's nice on your photo, like if you're looking at your camera, you have basically thumbnails for you, right? If you're looking at the whole library, you have thumbnails of all your compositions. So you can kind of quickly look and see which one looks the most interesting. And so then I'll pull those photographs and I'll say, okay, this one was kind of interesting. This one was kind of interesting. It's worth me exploring. So I'm going to saturate the colors, and I'm going to play with that. Sometimes I use multiple photos for one painting. Maybe the background and one is the colors are more interesting, and then the foreground in another one. So I might saturate and get the background in one, but then the front is too washed out. So I might use a second photo where the front is not as washed out but more saturated, and combine the two. Now, if I was really savvy in Photoshop, I could merge those two together, but I'm not that savvy. So, I will look at the two different ones. Photoshop, the only thing I just started doing, and I haven't done very much, is you can replace colors. So I am like infancy when it comes to Photoshop. So don't think you have to be a master at it. And I just kind of really try to look at it and see which one's more interesting. And that's where, if you have like a art group or friends, even if they're online, my art group is online. If I am like trying to decide between one or other, which one's more interesting, I'll reach out and send like 5 or 6 to some of my friends and say, okay, which one's more interesting to you? And they might have a whole different take than you thought of, because you've been sitting there looking at it for too long. And so they might look at it. I'll have my son look, I'll have my mom look, I have my art group look. And then if I'm having a hard time, sometimes I know immediately, this is it, this is what I'm going to do. But sometimes if I'm trying to decide, then I'll send it out and see which one that they choose over the other one. So it's interesting to get input. Sometimes it can be too much, but for it can be helpful also. So yeah, so playing with that. And like I said, in the workshop, I'll be going through a little more of how we set it up, and then where I saturate. But it's kind of playing around with your camera and playing around with Photoshop, but I do most of it on my camera.
Thank you.
Carrie,
Yes.
will we be getting a list of the supplies we need for your class?
Yes, I'll have to make sure. Someone had already emailed me about it, so I thought maybe it had gone out. So
We haven't posted on our website, but I will be sending out a letter to all the people that have registered, and it will include any drawings, any images, and the supply list.
Hi,
So
Carrie.
Great.
it'll be definitely be
you.
taken care of.
Okay,
Carrie,
thanks.
this is Barbara Wakefield. I'm signed up and thank you for getting back to me so quickly. Oh my gosh, Jan Grady, you're here. Hello.
You're welcome. Did you have a question or just?
No, I just wanted to thank you. You got me back to me real quick. 'Cause
You're welcome.
yeah, I had a lot of, I have a lot of Windsor and Newton. And yeah, and I really want to try some different things. Haven't taken a class in a long time. So thank you. I've already gotten all of them and I look forward to it.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah. If you have paints and you love them, I said this in my email to Barbara, but with the colors, if you have paints, I don't want you to have to buy everything new, but you have to ask yourself. Sometimes I have students who are like, I don't want to buy new paints. I'm like, that's fine. Bring what you have. And I enjoy the variety because Windsor Newton's going to have a different look than what mine has. But that can be frustrating to some students. Like, it's not looking exactly like my neighbor's painting. So you have to decide, will that bother you or won't that bother you? If it's not an issue for you, then use those colors. Will you embrace the differences? And sometimes I'm like, oh, look at the effect you're getting. That's really, that's neat. And then, like I said, some people find it frustrating. So you just have to decide. And then it's an investment for the paint. So I really do try to only put paints that I love on my list. And I hope that people will love as well. So I really try to just have the colors that I think might work for you in other applications afterwards and not just one-offs, I wanted to show you guys, this is online. It should be online for every color manufacturer. If you've never really looked at this, this is really helpful if you're not familiar or you're trying to decide if you want to buy a color. These are the color charts. And like I said, every manufacturer should have one. This is Daniel Smith. It's online as well as having it in person. But the chart is pretty easy to read. It shows you at the top what everything means. So this would be really good one if you're trying to figure out light fastness, like how long this is going to last. 100+ years is their Roman numeral I, or 1, which is excellent light fastness. 4 is their fugitive, 15 to 20 years. And then it goes to 2 and 3, which is 2 is 100 years, 3 is 50 to 70 years. So if you're trying to decide a red that you want to buy, you might not want to buy a fair, you might want to buy the 1 or the 2. So that can inform your decision because it shows you on there. Also on there, it shows you transparent, semi-transparent, and opaque. So all of those things you might want to think about. It shows you non-staining, low staining, medium staining, and high staining. Important if you're trying to lift, right? If you want a color that's going to be able to lift or not, you want that on here. In the backgrounds, I want a staining color. If I'm doing a dark background, I want staining. If I'm glazing, I might want that's not a staining so I can lift it. And then granulation, yes or no. And then they've got Primatech, so he has a P. Those are the ones that are made from the minerals, so they might have a little mica in them. So that shows you that. And those are pretty much always in granulating, I would venture to say. And then it has, and then this one tells you what it comes in: 15 milliliter tubes, 5 milliliter sticks, or half pans. So it shows you what they have them in. So this can be really informative for you if you're trying to decide, if you want to buy a color that's on a workshop list, or, when you're trying to decide what color you want to use. So these charts are handy. So I wanted to show you that. And then I wanted to show you, Daniel Smith has a dot card system. So you can purchase this. I don't remember, it's in the 20-something dollar range, but it has a dot of every color that they make at Daniel Smith. And so you can actually use these, it's just a little bit of it, but you can use those colors to try them out on these dot cards. And so this also tells you the exact same information that was on that list, but then you also, in addition, have a dot of that color. So he has these for sale on there. I don't know if other companies have the dot card or not, but these are really nice, especially like in a workshop situation. You have a dot of that color if you don't want to buy a whole tube. And most of the time when you're in a workshop, if you didn't buy a tube of something and you really loved it, I share a lot and other students normally share. And then my art's in the front. I just thought that was cool because they just put the new one out and they included one of my paintings. And then if you're in my workshop, you'll be getting one of my dot cards. This is Daniel Smith, and these are our colors that I use a lot. I had to choose, how many are on here? 6 times 3. I had to choose, my palette that I use the most. And so that is my dot card. So I'll have those for you if you're in the workshop. So I just want to show you that information. And like I said, every manufacturer will have this information on their website. And if you're traveling, it's not a bad idea to print off. They will have information to put in your suitcase if you have any issues, and always call it artist colors and not paint whenever you're like going through customs. All right, are we ready to demo? Any more questions before we go back and paint?
I don't
All right.
see any in the chat, so we must be good.
All right. So I'm going to come over. I found my cement pickup. Woo woo. So I'm going to go through and just show you. I have masked out the lettering on here. So I want to go show you how I'm going to work on this. So here's this cross for the prescription bottle, right? And so I'm going to take off my masking in this area. Another thing I will tell you, if you're working on a large painting and you're masking and you don't know how quickly you're going to get to that painting, I would only mask a third to a half and then wait and do this other half later. Because if, let's say you start it, you have full intentions, especially like a workshop or whatever, you have full intentions of finishing it and life gets in the way, you don't want to come back and have that masking stuck on there. I have left it on there for, I'd say I normally finish most, but 6 months is probably the most. And depending on how hot your house is or wherever your art's being stored is a big factor, humidity and heat. My friend had a studio in Florida and says she only ran the air conditioning when she was in there. Well, that's not great for masking fluid, right? So she would have to bring her paintings into the house that had masking on them. So if you have issues, so this is the other great thing I love about having my iPad that I paint from. When I go to do these letters, I'm gonna zoom that in as big as I can so that I really see what I'm looking at in that photo reference. If you're in the workshop, I highly suggest you bring a tablet if you have it, to paint from. And also, like I said, I do like to try to incorporate having a Zoom screen so that people can, if they want to, only if they want to, they can go on and watch, for, you know, have a front row at the class in addition to being able to walk up and see it. So I'm coming in now with my horizon blue and I'm going in and I'm thinning out some of this masking line that I had and I'm reshaping. Horizon blue is a lighter color. Remember how I said I like to map out in a lighter color. So horizon blue is lighter. So I'm coming in, I'm thinning out lines. And then we're going to come down here and I'm going to get some of my verditer blue. It just sounds funny. I like to use the phalos a lot and that gets confusing. I'll be like phthalo blue green shade, phthalo green yellow shade, phthalo blue yellow green, yellow or red shade. So I'm going to come with verditer blue and we're going to deepen this a little bit. And instead of having like hard lines, I kind of am like doing a little of that pointillism again, so that I'm breaking up that line a little. It doesn't look like it's, I don't want to show anything that looks like it's outlined. Do not want outline. And that's why a lot of the time I'm lettering. Let's say even you're painting a billboard in a scene, in a street scene or something, or in this case, we're doing these pressed letters. You never ever want to outline the entire letter. And this is where you got to put your artist's eyes on and really observe shapes, colors. And we're trying to like not look at this and say, okay, this is a cross. We're trying to look at this and say, okay, this color goes to this color, goes to that color. And that's the best I've had when I was teaching drawing classes. I'll never forget. I had this woman that said she almost got in a car accident because she had never looked at a tree until we, like really observed a tree until she had taken my class. And we were, she's like, it's not just brown with green. She's like, there's all these shades in the bark and the colors of the leaves. And so she had her aha moment while she was driving and almost got in an accident. But that's such a compliment, you know, to hear somebody really start to see, right? And that's what we're trying to do as artists, is have everybody's view the world the way we view it for a minute. And how do we want to portray in our art? What do we want to portray? What are we trying to show people? For me, I'm just trying to show beauty and spotlight these utilitarian objects. It's almost like they're having their glamour shot moment, you know. My ultramarine turquoise, and I'm just trying to really go in and get these little shapes that are in here. And if I look, and it comes across. So once again, I'm doing that kind of pointillism. Out. So let's come down, and like all of a sudden that's starting to take on, it looks a little pressed, you know, like it's got some dimension to it. And I'm going to come over here. I'm going to get a little Payne's gray. And once again, I do not want to outline anything, so this is a hit and miss. I'm going to come over here. This is pretty bright white in here, but it's got some darkness underneath it. Anytime you have the brightest light color, the darkest value is going to be below it somewhere. So I'm not outlining, I'm doing hit and miss of this dark color so that we can emphasize that brightness. We can switch up our color if we don't want it to be this dark. I can switch it up and I can get my verditer blue or my ultramarine turquoise, and I can switch to that color. So we're going to switch up color. So it's not just Payne's gray, which is dark. Now we're switching colors, and we're not outlining. We're kind of hit and miss here and there because we do not want this to look like an outlined object. Do a little pointillism here and there, break it up. Okay. Now let's come over to these kanji letters. I'm coming in with verditer blue. I don't want to start with my darkest dark. I'm going to come with a little lighter color so that if I get the shape wrong, I can fix it. Now my biggest fear when I paint kanji is that I'm going to have it say something totally wacky. So sometimes I have my Japanese friend check my work. It's really funny that I have a whole bunch of Japanese lanterns, and they're like the paper lanterns, and they use those to advertise their businesses in Japan. So you'll see them hanging on the buildings, but it tells you what that building is, you know, instead of like a billboard. And so I have a whole bunch of these that I bought at, they call them shrine sales. So when you actually go to the grounds of a shrine and they have like an antique sale. And so I have a whole bunch of them. I put them on my Christmas tree. One year I did a Japanese tree, and I had a whole bunch of my Japanese friends. And they were laughing about one of the lanterns. And it was, I can't remember what it was, but it was like for a restroom or something like that. And they were just laughing that I had a sign for a restroom on my Christmas tree. Of course, the whole idea of Christmas trees, I mean, they embrace Western Christmas in Japan. They love the idea of Santa and the tree and all that. They love in Japan. They're very fascinated with the Western world. So anyway, but they thought that was funny. I was glad it wasn't something more scandalous than a restroom. They wouldn't tell me at first. My brain was going into all kinds of places. Well, kanji is just beautiful. And that's why I was so excited when I found these bottles. I also have light bulbs that are Japanese that have kanji on the light ends of the light bulbs, you know, like what ours say, like Sylvania or whatever. They have kanji on them. And I think it's important. I have some students online that I meet with. And I think another really important thing is I set up my still life and I set it up outside and I photograph. I'm pretty anal about this, right? I photograph it and I want it to be exactly, I'm really planning it out and everything. And unless you've painted for a really long time, and I don't even know, it just depends on how your brain works. Some people are, I have a friend, she can take a reference from a, let's say she took a really cruddy picture, like not good at all, poorly lit at a store, and she's able to come back and, you know, somehow put that in a still life and make it work. But I don't like to do that. My brain just doesn't work that way. I don't want to have to think that hard about it. I want to have it. But she's all about the narrative of the painting. I really want the visual and the graphic appeal. So she doesn't think about the graphic appeal. She thinks about the narrative. I think about the graphic nature. And so it's just two different thought processes. So anyway, I think it's very important, and especially with students that are starting out, you need those props. I have a student right now, she has pictures from a store that she took, but they're not lit well. The light source is going to be wrong. So if you try to use that photograph and try to incorporate it into another still life, it's just not going to be as successful as if you had the actual object. But in saying that, I will say that I feel like I have become like a glass bottle hoarder or light bulbs because I want to have the objects. Living in Japan, oh my goodness, I couldn't stop myself. I bought lots of teacups and china and things like that, and kimonos and obis. But that's an aesthetic that I love, is the Asian aesthetic. And so now I'm going to switch colors. So since I'm not outlining these letters, I am coming in and I'm switching colors. I've got horizon blue here, and I was just using the vertitor blue. And so I'm going to switch up these colors. So I got lights and darks. Guarantee this doesn't say what it's supposed to say. That's okay. I started to learn how to read Japanese, but there are multiple alphabets and like 3,000 characters each. So, fun fact, it takes an elementary school child their entire elementary career to learn all of the alphabets. Kanji, hiragana, and the other one I'm missing. Will come to me in a minute. So kanji is the one that's like China, Asia, across the board. It's based on symbols. And so when you're in China, so it's kind of like us going to Europe. We can read it, right? Because it's the same alphabet, but we don't know what the word means. Same thing with the kanji with China and Japan. But then hiragana and, oh my gosh, how am I forgetting the other one? There's another alphabet. Those are based on sounds and symbols. So it was interesting. I lived in Europe for 3 years. I lived in Germany and traveled a lot in Europe, and then moving to, and like I said, you understand the alphabet, right? So you can still understand what the words are. You can sound them out, you know, like that, but you don't know exactly what it says. But going to a country where you're illiterate is a whole different ball of wax. I'm switching back to my vertitor blue. So I'm trying to have like color differences and King's gray. So I want to go back up and I want to step back, see what I'm missing. Part of that. Half of it. So now I want to go back in and adding some darks into these. So color difference, not outlined. I'll continue to work on that, but I wanted you to get the idea. So now let's come over here and let's work on one that we recognize the letters, right? So we can work on this L up here. So we did our base. I could probably get a little more color in here. This is my Vertitor blue. And make sure that underneath this is kind of dark enough. Now we're gonna go back in. I'm gonna get my Horizon blue, and we're gonna do the same thing that we did with the kanji with this letter. This says Lydia E. Pinkham. I looked this up the other day. It's an elixir for women, and it's kind of funny. It's controversial because I guess they didn't really work, these tonics or whatever, but they were like to help with hysteria in women and various different ailments. I just thought it was kind of funny. I'm gonna get my Vertitor blue. So I'm looking at color, shapes, and relationships. I've got my Payne's gray now. Oh, this is a little wet. I still have masking in here. I have not taken the masking off of this one yet. I probably need to in the middle there. Getting a thirsty brush and pull the masking in a second on that one. So I can get all of it. Now my Horizon blue. Now this is where I'm using kind of more like a cream-like consistency. And this is still a little, I had done a little wash. It's a little wet right here. It's masking, so we'll pull that masking in a second. Sometimes it's helpful to have a little of the masking when you're doing some of the shapes and you pull it off. Spreading a little too much. Change that. All right, let's go to the D. My Horizon blue. I'm really trying to look at these letters. A little Vertitor blue. I also think it's super beneficial to paint a series. I have a friend who's an excellent painter, but she does not like the idea of painting a series. And I get it, it can get a little boring, but I feel like when you're looking at shapes, relationships, colors, sometimes it doesn't matter the subject. I mean, yes, you want to make sure your composition is great and all that. You want it to be good, but does it matter if I'm painting light bulbs versus something else? And the more I paint light bulbs, the more I paint ball jars, I get so familiar with them that they become easier and easier to paint. Lettering is kind of the same way. I have painted lettering on jars. I have painted lettering, like I had books stacked up in some of my paintings and done all the lettering for books. You can use the ruling pen and load it with ink, with paint, just like you would ink. So you kind of do like I'll show you on this one. So I'm going to use my ruling pen. I'm going to tighten it so it's barely open. And I'm going to come in here in my Payne's gray. And I'm coming in and I'm getting it on my brush. So I'm loading, I want an ink consistency. Like if you got ink in a bottle. This is still my watercolor, but and then I'm loading it by doing on the side, pulling the pigment from the side of my brush. Loading the reservoir. You should do that not over your painting. Okay, sometimes it gets a little messy on the top and bottom, so you gotta be careful you don't touch the inside. You touch the bottom and the top to make sure you get it clean. So let's go over here. It's dry enough. I'm gonna come here. Close that a little bit more. I want that pretty tight. And I'm gonna come over here for my lettering so I can get a straight line. This pink's not dry. So if your paint's dry, it works a little easier to see an area of it. It's dry paint. So I can start to get, like I said, we don't want to outline, but this helps get straight lines. So this is when another application you can use a ruling pen for. Still watercolor paint. You can use it to sign your names on your paintings as well. There's also the dip pens. They sell the glass dip pens that you can load and do similar. I cannot get the dip pens to work. If you look up glass dip pens, you'll see on Amazon, but I can't get the glass dip pens to work with the masking fluid very well because you need it thinner than our masking fluid is. And you can only thin out masking fluid. So if your masking fluid gets thick in the bottle, you only can change the properties by 10%. So if you add a ton of water to thin it out and it's more than 10%, then you're causing a problem and it may not come off your paper. Wet paint when I did that. So I wanted to show you that you can go in and get definition with your ruling pen. Get rid of a little bit of this masking up here. Okay, go in and get this one done. Of course, you can use smaller brushes too, but sometimes it's nice, you know, with a ruling pen, you can also use a ruler to get a straight line. You can go in with a ruler and your masking and your ruling pen and get a completely straight line. But it is a tool in your toolbox and it does take some practice. So it's not like you grab it, pull it out of the package and have super success right away. You got to practice a little bit. And I'll tell you, I learned to use a ruling pen in college. When I took graphic design first, I graduated interior design, but I took graphic design first. And he had us do an entire semester where all we did were straight lines with a ruling pen. So I spent an entire semester with black ink and straight lines, and we did lots of different designs, but it was just a series of lines. And the whole goal was for us to get it where that pressure from the first to the end, the consistency of the ink was exactly the same all the way through. And that's what we spent an entire semester doing. And so by the end of that, I'm going to use a ruling pen really well. And at the time, I thought, hey, I'm never going to use this. And guess what? I do. Every day. Still not convinced I use algebra. But, you know. Okay, so you start to see that letter popping out. Where do you? A little too close here, so I'm gonna rub out L and my L and my Y. Somehow merged a little. So this is a great place to use a scrubber brush. Look at that. Because that color, the Payne's gray and the verdant are not very staining, look how well they lifted. All right, give me a little Payne's gray. I love Payne's gray for deepening colors. And the plain, it's actually Payne's blue gray. It just has ultramarine mixed in with the Payne's gray, so it's cooler. It's great if you're painting glass. So that is a color. It's in every one of my paintings with glass, white wood. I'd say pretty much every one of my paintings. Love that color. And if you have Payne's Gray, you can add ultramarine and mix it yourself, but it conveniently comes in a tube. I got that too low. Let's see, somewhere I'm off. Make sure we're at the same height all the way across. Okay, so I'm gonna make the D a little bit longer and the Y a little short. When I teach things like this and I'm having a demo, I feel like how crazy it is to have all this little detail and stuff, but I like the effects. Okay, I'm gonna get a little verdant or blue. So you start to get the idea here with this glass, you know, these letters that are popping out. Multiple colors. No, we're not outlining. We're switching up the colors. We're looking at the shapes. We've got our highlights masked. I like to get impatient and go to where it's wet. Okay, so that's some of our lettering right there. Show you examples of that. All right, how much time do we have left?
It's 3:30 now, so about 30 minutes.
Okay, does anybody have an area they would like me to see, or I will skip an area otherwise? Are there any questions?
This is Jane. Would you be able to do some of the green bottle where you put the masking on it?
Yes, I will come and do this guy right back here.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's work on him. I just said that. That's what I wanted to do. All right, so we're gonna come back here and we're gonna work on these green bottles back here. And so I have already laid down the two colors were spring green and phthalo green shade, phthalo yellow green. So those are the two colors, mostly phthalo yellow green on this one. But you see some of these little dark areas, that was the spring green. And then down here, I've got horizon blue and ultramarine turquoise in there just for that mottled effect. So now we're gonna come back and we're gonna start getting definition. These are my favorite kind of bottles. They don't have lettering on them, nothing complicated, just pretty colors. So I'm gonna come in now with my horizon blue up here and we'll work on this guy so we can pull some masking off so I can show you how you can do the different levels of masking, right? So we obviously know how you take it off and you get the bright white. Well, now we've done it on top of this color. So we're gonna show you how that works. And you can still soften it and play with it, but it's another great way, like I said, in glass, especially. I just think in most paintings, especially like I have some paintings or some photo references from Italy. They have a lot of texture. So I think this is a technique I will use a lot when I have a lot of texture, because I can get in there and mask it out. The other thing you can do is, let's say you have a painted area that's completely already resolved, that's as dark as I'm going to do this area. I can mask on top of that, you know, blobs or something, and it pulls a little of the pigment off. So it's a slight variation, but it pulls a little off. So you can go in and pull some shapes off of already painted areas. So it's just a fun tool. All right, I'm going to use sap green now. Come in here. I've got sap green's a little on the warm side. And then over here, I've got some turquoisey colors, so those are a little cooler. And the other color, I didn't spare colors on this painting. Like in the workshops, I tried to like streamline it. But this one I'm using as many as I want, and that's fun too. So this is sap green, and undersea green is a great green as well. And that I'm going to use to darken in a second. And it's undersea, like under the sea, undersea green. All right, I'm going to throw a little ultramarine turquoise, I think. I just want to turquoise it up a little bit up here. I painted a lot of green bottles. I have a painting called Going Green. It was all green bottles. That masked, okay. So it's so fun to let these colors mingle. This is what I'm talking about, you know, just letting them mingle on the paper. And they're clean and they're vibrant. And you do have to have a pretty good grasp of how your water handling, you know, like how much water, so that you get the desired effect, so that it's not just a soup where it all mixed together. So you have to know a little bit, and you also kind of have to have a good indication of working time, you know, like, and that is going to vary for everybody. Some areas of the country are more humid than others, and you might have a longer working time because it takes your paper longer to dry. Other areas might be, you know, in California, I would venture to say it's a little drier at times. If it's a rainy day, you'll have a little longer working time. So you kind of have to, you learn how long. So this is the undersea green. And I'm dropping that, and you see how they're melding so well right now. Now that's still not quite dark enough. And this is another thing, I like to just get it done. I don't like to sit there, let it dry. I like to just get it done as fast as I can. And we're probably still gonna have to glaze, you know, one more time, but I want to get the value pretty fast. So it's important to me that I get my darkest darks established right away, so that I don't putz around and have everything too light, because when, you know, like you can sit there and putz around and get pretty washes and it's got it and I love it. And then you put the dark in next to it and you're like, oh my gosh, I need to make that, you know, so much darker. And so it's kind of like, then you're just you're running on a hamster wheel. So may as well get this as dark as you can. This is my Payne's gray that I'm coming in with. And dropping in on top of that undersea green and sap green. Now I have a thirsty brush. I'm just going to come and pull some of this. My sap green, or I have Payne's gray on my brush right now. And it's mixing in there. There's some Payne's gray up here. And we're getting that nice deep dark, right? Now, my darkest dark that I normally use, like let's say I was doing a black background, my darkest dark is normally indigo and sepia, and it's mixed 50-50. So the same amount of indigo and sepia are used. And then I mix those two on the, mix those two on the together, and that's my darkest dark. But I don't want to use indigo and sepia on here, because what if I need to lift it? I'm using Payne's gray because it's not as dark. All right, so I'm dropping a little sap green in here. Things are a little dry up there. All right, so we're starting to get that resolved to the color, and we still have some of that masking on there. Let's come down, we're gonna work the next area. I'm gonna add some more horizon blue because that got really light. See, when I put all those darks, how much lighter that got? So I'm gonna add another little glaze of that horizon blue when it dries. So let's come down and work. Now, I'm gonna skip this little neck section, because if I get into that, it's all gonna travel, right? So let's come down and start working in here. And there's some really pretty colors in here. So let's start working in here. So I'm gonna introduce a color we haven't used yet. And it's our phthalo blue red shade. And our phthalo blue red shade is what we're going to use on these bottles. One of the colors. I love the phthalos. They're kind of like the party They bring a lot of color and a lot of prettiness. So we're gonna drop some of that. Now I have some green on here, so it's not as bright. We'll put some over here where we don't have the green and it'll be a little brighter. Get a little water. And that's mask, so I don't have to go around. Okay. I even see a little purple, so I'm gonna get a little carbazole violet. Put a little carbazole violet down here. It gets dark down here, but I don't necessarily want it to be black or Payne's gray, so I'm gonna do the dark with my purple because it'll give it a little life. I'm gonna keep our shapes right. Okay. I'm gonna come over here, same thing. I'm gonna come and do this dark area with my purple. So sometimes I like to do that, especially in a dark area, mix it up a little bit. It may not look, and on the screen you may not notice as much, but it's got, you can see the purple and the blue mixing and it's giving a little life. All right, let's come back and get our sap green. So same color combos that we did up in here, we're gonna continue down here. So I'm gonna get my sap green. And do you see how dark we're getting? And in the workshop, we'll be doing that. Ikigai, it has the ginkgo leaves, and that'll be so fun because it's the right time of year even. Fall, bright gold leaves. Do you have ginkgo? A lot of ginkgos in California. I don't know where they're native. I'm gonna get a little verditer blue and put that over here. So we have variations on our blue. I might get a little of the phthalo blue red shade. And put it in here too, so it plays with the verditer. All right, and we're gonna go back to our sap green. We're starting with that lighter color. And because we're gonna get it darker, so we're gonna throw that sap green in, we're gonna get even darker. And come up around this. I'm not coming all the way there, although it's getting dry now. We could. I'm gonna pull that up. Okay, we have our mask in there. All right, so now we're gonna color shift. We come down to these springier colors. So let's get our spring green. No, sorry, we're gonna do our phthalo green yellow shade. Phthalo green yellow shade. And it doesn't bother me that that's mixing with that sap right there because we have a transition. So that is actually working. I'm gonna pull it up a little bit in there to have that happen where we're blurring that line a little bit. And I'm gonna pull that and then with a little bit of the blue coming, it doesn't bother me. I want a little color things happening. If it furs out too much or you get too much blue, go in with a thirsty brush and just pull it back. A thirsty brush, it's a push and a pull, a push and a pull. I'm gonna come with a clean brush and I just wanna get this edge. I don't want it to be a hard line. So I'm coming in with a clean brush. Okay. I'm gonna get a little bit of sap green in my brush and put it over here on this edge. And the water do its job and the water is just gonna pull it around. Rinse my brush. I'm gonna get a thirsty brush again, not a lot of water in the brush. We're gonna clean up this edge. Okay. Now we're gonna come down below this bright highlight. Pull that up so you can see. So we're on this shape right here. We're gonna come down below. So I'm gonna get my sap green. And these are so fun to paint because I just love having these colors mingle. And I paint a lot of things with complicated subjects and, you know, like little pieces and parts. And so it's fun to just be able to play.
It's about 15 more minutes, Carrie.
Okay. I'll let that, hopefully this will be dry up here a little bit and we can pull some of that masking off and I can show you. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. And I'll try to put a time lapse on as I finish this painting so that maybe we can get it out to you. I'm gonna get a little undersea green. It's fun to watch. I wish I could paint as fast as a time lapse. An undersea green. And there's still, okay, so this is all pretty warm right now, but there's some coolness in here. So I'm gonna go and get my ultramarine turquoise and throw a little of that ultramarine turquoise in there. Get a clean brush and I'm gonna try to get some of the sap green to show underneath and the ultramarine turquoise. Horizon blue and touch up this area. So I constantly kind of do a value check as I'm painting one area to the next. And same thing in here. I'm going to do sap green first, and then I'm going to add a little of our ultramarine turquoise to cool it off a little. Ultramarine turquoise. I'm going to get my undersea green. So once you kind of get a combination of colors you like down, you can continue to use those colors in your other green bottles. And I like to make sure whatever color I introduce in a painting is at least in 3 places and in a triangle if possible. So that triangle shape makes it stronger. So if we have a dark undersea green over here, then I should come back over here and try to see if I can incorporate some undersea right in here. And then you'd want to have, you know, somewhere else, you know, so that you have like deck in this bottle so that you're creating a triangle. Triangle is your strong shape, one of your strongest shapes. Should I get this shape? Right. A little bit. Look like it has eyes up there or something. I don't know if this is going to be dry enough for me to pull it off or not, but the whole idea is that we now will have sparkle in here that is not bright white, but that is lighter green, definitely not dry enough. These are some of our whites over here. I was just going to pull a little up so you can see. But underneath there, it'll be the lighter green. So the other thing is, if you have taken, let's take some sparkles off. I'll show you this, and this will be one of the last things. Let me get any questions. So over here, we have bright white sparkles on this bottle. So I'm going to pull the highlights in here because I'm pretty happy. So now if it's going to look too white to me in places. So what I can easily do is take a thirsty brush. So I'm just rinsing, no pigment is in it, not a lot of water. And I can come back and I can come over just a few areas. You can add a little water if you're not getting any movement. And you can just tone down by just kind of hit and miss some. You don't want all of the sparkles to be gone, but that's another way. So I could have done a base thin wash like we did over there, and then mask on top, but I wanted a variety of whites and darks. So now I'm just going to hit and miss, go back over this and just take the edge off of some of them so it's not so bright. So that's how we start to get different levels of sparkle, so it's not so bright white everywhere. And then I'll come back on top too, because these bottles have kind of a dark area where they mark the measurements on there. So I'll come on top of that and do the dark. So you've got all these layers that come together at the end when you're cleaning up. But making sure that your masking is nice and thin. And so, and you can also pull I just have water that I'm pulling the local color. So you could add color, or you can just pull from the color around to tone it down. All right, we're probably very close. Any last questions? If you have workshop questions, you're free to email me, carriewallerart@gmail.com. Color substitution workshops that are any of that. The supply list is online and it'll be coming out in an email, it sounded like, as well, Vicki. And then
Yes.
so yeah, so any questions on that or any supplies, feel free to email me. So any last things before we head off?
Hi, this is Susan Jockheim. Hey, Vicky and Debbie, did you guys already speak about if anybody who is attending the workshop is here about the drawing that they'll need to make prior to coming to the workshop?
No, I don't have the drawing yet. Do you have it, Susan?
No, but Kara will be forwarding it, and she's asking people to have the drawing ready to go on the morning of.
Yes, I'll send you a drawing and I'll send you a masking map. So it'll show you where to put the masking. So you'll have both of those. So you'll want to come ready to go because these paintings take a long time. So you'll want to have your drawing ready. So I'll have that out within this week to you so that you have all that. And we probably will do it 11 by 14-ish. So we hopefully can finish a big bulk of it in the workshop. But that'll be coming, and you should already have the supply list, but that'll come out again and all together. And then, yeah, masking map, supply list, drawing. I think that's all. And so you can ask about any of those things. And there's not a ton of masking in that one. It'll be mostly on the teacup.
So Carrie will forward the drawing and the masking map to us, and then we'll forward it out to the students a week prior to the begin date of the workshop.
Yes. Gotcha.
I have a question. This is Sue Sweet. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you. So I would really love it if I could get it more than a week in advance, like maybe a couple of weeks in advance, because I work and it'd be, I want to take some time to get it done. Is that possible?
Okay, when Carrie sends it to me, I will get them out within a day or so.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, and I'm gonna look. If I don't have it already done, I've got to drop for class anyway, so it will be in the next few days that it'll go out to Vicki. So
awesome. That's great.
I sent it to you, Vicki, right?
Yes, that will be fine. Susan or I is great.
Okay.
And is there a reference photo by any chance, or is it?
Yes, I'll have the reference photo sent out as well. I believe I still have the reference photo of that. So you'll have all of it. You'll have your reference photo. You'll have a picture of the completed painting that I've done. You'll have a masking map and a
Line drawing. Okay, perfect. That sounds perfect, Carrie.
Supply list.
Well, thank you so much. This was a great demo.
Thank you. I hope it was. I know I paint slow, but I tried to hit on some of the fun techniques in different ways, even though it's a long painting. But in the class, it's fun. We go step by step together, and most people are very happy. I've not had anybody that was just crying at the end. Everybody's really happy at the end of things. So it's really like everyone's working together and having a good time, and we're working on the best results possible. So we'll go around and have painting time, and I'll come around and look at everybody's, and we'll do little critiques, and it's as comfortable as you want it to be. You don't have to participate in the critiques unless you want to, but it is beneficial. So anyway, I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. I had another, this is Sue again, sorry. I had another quick question. What kind of pencil do you use to do your drawings on your paper?
Just a number 2 mechanical
Okay.
pencil.
Okay, wonderful. Just curious. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
Okay, I think that does it. Thank you so much, Carrie, and we'll see you in a couple weeks, but we'll be in touch in between.
Yeah, sounds good. Looking forward to seeing everybody live and in person. All right.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you,
you
Carrie.
everybody for coming
Thank you.
today.